Alright, welcome everybody to another mixing video. Today we're going to be looking at a mix using the Slate Digital Everything Bundle. So everything in this mix is using the plugins within the Slate architecture. And the Slate plugins are absolutely fantastic. They're by far my favorite plugins. And I actually do own perpetual licenses to most of the plugins. But a couple plugins came out that I really wanted to try. And there was a great Black Friday sale that you could get the Everything Bundle at a discounted rate, and you would get a free plugin. So the free plugin that I chose was the Reverb Suite Classics, which to me is just an absolute steal even at its full price. Just the fact that you get a Bricacity with it is pretty amazing. So that's the plugin that I picked. There is one plugin that's not a Slate Digital plugin. I'll talk about it when I get to it, but basically I used a compressor that had a sidechained capability just because right now the Slate plugins don't have that. I assume in the future they will, but as of right now they don't. So that's why I had to use that instead. But it's not really a tone or a character piece or anything. It's just turning down the vocal delay when the vocal is singing. So as you can see here, this is a very simple track. It's just a MIDI piano with a pad sound and a lead vocal. And I believe that this instrument here came out of just a stock Logic VSTi, because the artist who sent this to me, she uses Logic on her computer. So it's not the greatest sounding VSTi, but it's usable. And you'll see how we kind of worked with that. And the lead vocal was recorded with one of those Apogee 96K USB mics. And it's a great sounding mic for her vocal. I'll leave a link in the description to her YouTube channel. So let's go ahead and listen to this mix a little bit. I'll bypass the plugins in and out just so you can hear what the final mix sounds like versus the original source. There is quite a bit of volume difference. So when I bypass the plugins, the original sound is actually quite a bit louder, but you'll still hear that the original mix is kind of muddy and just not balanced right. It just doesn't feel right, or it doesn't really have any depth or any vibe really. So that's one of the things that Slate Digital plugins are known for. So enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and listen to this, and we'll talk more afterwards.
Feel like I've awakened lately. Chains around me are finally breaking. I've been under self-restoration. I'm becoming my own salvation. Showing up, no more hiding. The light inside me is bursting, shining. It's my time to butterfly. All hard work is so far gone. It's more than just survival. This is my revival. This is my revival. Whoa, hold me, wrap me in a love, fill up my cup. Empty, 'cause only your love can fill up my cup. 'Cause I'm hollow, 'cause I'm hollow. I don't wanna be the last man standing. I don't wanna be the only one picking petals when the party's over. No, it's not any fun. I'm hollow, I'm hollow, 'cause I'm hollow, hollow. This won't take too long, you'll see. I confess my weakness, I'm not giving all of me. I pick up the parts that are broken, pour out your perfection, which shot out at me like a rifle. Was it revival? Revival, yeah, 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 yeah. Hold me, wrap me in love, fill up my cup, empty. Only your love can fill up my cup. Whoa. 'Cause I'm hollow, I'm hollow, I'm hollow, I'm hollow.
Okay, so let's take a look at that. I mean, as you could hear, when I bypass the plugins, it just really loses some sense of depth and space. To me, it's just really flat and one-dimensional. But with the plugins, which you can see, there's not very many plugins on here. It really just opens it up. And I was hearing now through the headphones that these tracks actually have some digital clipping in the actual recording itself. So there's not much I can do about that. I tried to just dial back some of the tape saturation and console saturation. So let's start by looking at the mix bus, because this is where I started in the mix. So I used the SSL emulation, and I really just pinned that. It really just brings the track to life. When I was bypassing this mix bus chain, most of what you're hearing disappear is the sound of this, actually. Sometimes I'll actually have this to where this red light is just barely lighting up in some spots, and that just really gives it a nice character. I love this on mix bus, and to me it just sounded great for this mix. I've tried this mix with the Trident console, and it also sounds really great. So let's go look at the EQ here. So I'm high passing at around 40 hertz. I'm cutting out some 400. I'm cutting some 4K just because this was recorded through some digital technology, and I wanted to get rid of some of that digital upper mids. And then adding some high end here, 12K. Just all of these are between half a dB to a dB and a half. That's generally the range that I like to use EQ on the mix bus. So about half a dB of this present from the high lift, which really sounds great, and about half a dB of the big. And I actually trimmed that back 2 dB because the VBC rack here actually kind of adds some gain. So I'm using the FG gray for the compression, and I'm using a 30 millisecond attack time with the auto release on a ratio of 2:1. I'm using the high pass sidechain here at 60 hertz so that the real low end doesn't trigger this. And I'm getting from like a dB, even sometimes hitting like half a dB on here to 2 dB at the most. Then everything else, the FG red, I'm just adding some drive. And then it's just running through the FG mu just to get the color of the tubes. And then I'm using the virtual tape machine on 15 inches per second. FG9 half-inch 2-track. So that just really gives it a nice sound. If you know me, this is one of my favorite plugins ever. So we'll skip over the FGX for now, and we'll look at the piano next because that's what I worked on after that. So the vocal and the piano both have the virtual tape machine. Same settings as the mix bus here, but I'm using the 2-inch 16-track instead of the mastering deck. Okay, so real simple. As far as the virtual mix rack, I'm adding some of this tube warmth here from the FG76, a tube pre, just to get some of that color. It sounds really nice. Then I'm using the Neve emulation to get some of that nice bottom end, some of that low mid warmth. And what I like to do with this custom EQ a lot of times on piano as well as guitar, I'll boost some top end, and then right above that I'll actually use a low pass filter, and it really leaves room for the top end on like the vocal for example, while still making it nice and sparkly and not sounding dull. Okay, so I cut out some 2K here also, just to make room for the vocal really, because there's a lot of 2K in her vocal. And I cut out some 400 just to get rid of some muddiness. I boosted some low end here at 100. And then I high passed right below that at 93. So that's kind of the same trick as what I did with the high end. And to me, the custom EQ does that really, really well. And this is one of my all-time favorite EQs. When I first got it, I was kind of iffy about it. But now it's one of my all-time favorites. It's great sounding. Okay, so as far as compression, I'm using Circuit 2, pretty fast attack, and a really fast release. I'm using a ratio of 4:1, and I'm getting about 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction, and I'm making up about 4 dB, 3.5 actually. So sometimes this does hit a little bit harder. That's why I made it up so much. And then I wanted to try the Bomber, and I actually was just using presets. I landed on this Mixbus 3D, and I just dialed back the intensity a little bit from the actual preset, and that really gave it some depth. Finally, I used the FG Mu in mid-side mode, and what I did was I compressed it a little bit in the center, and then used the output here to make it a little bit wider on the sides. So I compressed it as well as dialed back the output in the center to make room in the middle for the vocal. And the attack and release times are important because I want this to sit back in the mix. So the vocal will come forward, the piano will be back behind it, and the center will be cleared out for it. So that's how I'm starting to think about the depth in this as well as the width. So from there, I went and created a bus that these are all that the vocal as well as the piano and the delay are going to, and I added the Verb Suite Classic. And all I did was I went to the Bracacity, and I went to the Spaces too, and used Lush Church, because to me that's just a very ambient space. I wanted this reverb to create space, and to me, when I think of a big space that sounds really beautiful for something like a piano and vocal type song, a church is perfect for that. And basically what I did was I increased the pre-delay all the way, added a little bit of chorus, a little bit of width, and then took back the highs and the lows on the EQ. And I'm just barely putting this in, 12.1%. And that really, really adds a nice space to this. It just, without this, it sounds lifeless. Okay, so before we look at the delay, we'll go to the vocal channel. I'm using the Eosis E2 or E squared, excuse me, E squared de-esser, and I'm using a singing preset, just female singing. The only thing I did was dial back the amount a little bit. I could have used the dry wet, but I just dialed back the amount. So real simple, just thinking about taming those S's before I add any upper mids or high end. And then that's also why I decided to choose 15 inches per second, because it kind of rolls off the top end as well as boosts the bottom a little bit. So that's a really nice way to start shaping your track before you EQ anything. So pretty much this is just stock. I'm not doing anything to the input or output. In the virtual mix rack, I'm using 1073 preamp just to get some color out of it, as well as the Neve console. Once again, same thing, trying to get the color and the low mids and lows in there. Adding half a dB of 12K, cutting out some of that 4K, and because to me it just didn't need it. Like I said, this was recorded with a digital mic, and it just kind of gets that ice pickiness. And then cleaned up some low mids and added some 200 to get some of that body, and high passed all the way up to 110. And if you know me, this is my usual vocal compression settings. Circuit 2, which is kind of like an opto. Slow attack, fast release, 3-to-1 ratio, and I'm getting about 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction, and I'm using the makeup gain to make up about 3 dB. Then following that, I'm using the 1176 Blue Stripe, and I'm getting about 1 to 2 dB on this of gain reduction. Slowest attack, fastest release, 100% mix, circuit 1, and I'm using the high pass sidechain here, so that way the low end doesn't really affect it that much. And this is just really great on vocals. I use the UAD one a lot, but now that I have the Blue Stripe in my virtual mix rack, I'll probably be using this a lot more, so that way I don't have to use another plugin. Finally, we'll go and check out the delay here, which is also being ran into this reverb, so that's kind of a nice thing. So I'm using Lexicon PCM42 emulation, just quarter note delay, barely any feedback, and what I'm doing is I'm rolling off a lot of the low end as well as the high end, and that's pretty much it. It's right up the middle, so this is a mono delay, just right up the center, just to give it some depth. And then I used a compressor on it with the sidechain, and if you look here, the lead vocal is feeding that sidechain. So basically what's happening is when the lead vocal is singing, the delay is being compressed and it's not being let through. Then when there's a pause in the vocal, it opens up and allows the delay to come through. So it's kind of a cool way of making like delay throws. And lastly, we'll check out the FGX. Here I'm getting about 1/4 of a dB to 1/2 a dB of compression. Slow attack, fast release. Very low ratio, 1.2 to 1. So this is barely compressing at all, just to sort of smooth out just a little bit more than what's being done here in the VBC. And then just adding the gain and trying to match that to the original mix using the dynamic perception, low punch, and detail. As far as the ITP, it's just right in the center at 0. So the low punch, detail, and dynamic perception are just to try and make the mastered sound or the leveled increase sound more like your original mix. But sometimes I go a little bit extra with it to try and either bring out some high end or some of that low end. But that's not really how it's intended. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disengage this constant gain monitoring, and let's just listen to this whole entire track start to finish. Just listen to the depth of it. You heard what the raw tracks sound like, and let's just sort of appreciate the talent of this song and this singer, because the singer is actually also playing the piano here. So let's listen to this start to finish, and then we'll call it a day.
I've awakened lately. The chains around me are finally breaking. I've been under self-restoration. I'm becoming my own salvation. Showing up, no more hiding. The light inside me is bursting, shining. It's my time to butterfly. All hard work is so far gone. It's more than just survival. This is my revival. This is my revival. Whoa, hold me, wrap me in love, fill up my cup. Empty, 'cause only your love can fill up my cup. 'Cause I'm hollow, I'm hollow, 'cause I'm hollow. I don't wanna be the last man standing. I don't wanna be the only one picking petals when the party's over. No, it's not any fun. 'Cause I'm fragile, and you know this. I'm hollow, I'm hollow, 'cause I'm hollow, This won't take too long, you'll see. I confess my weakness. I'm not giving all of me till you pick up the parts that are broken. Pour out your perfection. What shot out at me like a rifle? Or was it revival? Revival, yeah. Hold me, wrap me in love, fill up my cup. Empty, only your love can fill up my cup. Whoa, 'cause I'm hollow, I'm hollow, I'm hollow, I'm hollow.
Okay, so I tweaked a little bit of things in there just to add some final little touches there. I experimented with the ITP here, and I liked it a little bit better with the smooth setting, which actually, now that I think of it, makes a lot of sense for this kind of song. So sometimes your first time listening through, you miss some things. So listening to it now, I made a few tweaks, and that's my reasoning behind that. So as you could hear, these plugins, they just add an incredible amount of vibe, great sense of space and depth. That the new reverb is incredible, and for that matter, so is the new delay. That delay really is really flexible. In fact, all the plugins are flexible, but I really love that delay. It's just, if you've seen my videos before, I like to use the Lexicon PCM42, and to me, this emulation is great. It sounds wonderful. So you could hear how it can transform a simple mix into something that sounds pretty radio ready, even though this piano sound was kind of a cheesy, pretty fake sounding VSTI, but in the context with the vocal, it sounds pretty realistic actually, and it just has such a great sense of space. That's just what keeps coming back to mind, is that sense of space and depth, and just you get that 3D image. And this is only 2 tracks, so if you can tell, I really like these Slate Digital plugins. So if you don't subscribe to the Everything Bundle, you should really check it out. It's a great deal. I mean, for the price of what it would cost you for one plugin, you get all of them, and you can definitely mix with just that bundle. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned some cool things out of this. There's a few little tricks in here, even though this is a very simple mix. I know this was a little bit long for something that should be very simple, but I just wanted to go pretty in depth for this for you guys, and just to show my appreciation for the craftsmanship and the skill that has been put into creating these plugins. They're very cool. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, you can give it a thumbs down. That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, as I always say. If you really liked this video, please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. I hope to see you in the next video, and thank you so very much for watching.